Hello Moogles, this is Schwantz27 here, and the first week of the Kefka Grand Prix Deluxe event has concluded, so let's recap all of the racing action with a look at the standings after week 1 and a preview of the track for next week's runs. This week's track was the Figaro Desert Passage, where you started with Locke and Edgar looking for 7 characters and 10 espers for Kefka unlock, with a Kefka Tower skip provided that you kill 12 bosses and do the Ancient Castle check. As is customary on all Kefka Grand Prix Deluxe flag sets, scaling is at characters plus espers plus dragons times 2.5, with a max level of 45, slightly higher than normal. You also start with 50,000 GP, but there will be no experience eggs or illuminas in shops, even with the Edgar discount, and starting with Locke means access to the Cursed Shield at 7 to 13 battles. Chests offer better possibilities with 40% random instead of the standard 20. However, 5% of those chests contain random encounters, so don't get your hand caught in the cookie jar without equipping your characters. Espers are able to be multi-summoned, so getting something like Bahamut or Golem or Fenrir is extra good with this set of options. Since we knew we would start with Edgar, the Ancient Castle check would always be available, but with only 2 bosses between Locke and Edgar, this would definitely influence routing to get to 10 more bosses for your Kefka Tower skip. Also, without having access to checks containing forced encounters, unless you get lucky with your 3rd character slot, many runners were taking off the Moogle Charm in the South Figaro basement while looting, or in South Figaro Cave en route to the Tunnel Armor check to get levels for countering the more aggressive scaling. As far as the individual seeds for the different cart classes, let's kick things off with the Chocobo class, which started off with Natural Magic Magitech Shadow to go along with Blitz, Locke, and X-Magic Edgar. The 5% monster in a box reared its ugly head early in this one with a Tyrannosaur pincer attack that caused a lot of resets, so hopefully you save before going into that town. As for free checks, we found a Genji armor heir to the Figaro throne, and for those that went to World of Ruin South Figaro first, finding Dragoon boots for Edgar, the choice between the Pearl Lance and Atma weapon was more difficult than if you went to the Narsh weapon shop first. A maximum 13 battle Cursed Shield definitely baited players into going to the Floating Continent, with it having 9 total fights there, so you'd be almost done with your Paladin Shield. However, there was still one more free check to take, since you didn't get progression at the others, and it was Umara waiting for you at Gal Manor. Peeking the results of this check early would have given the 411 that Celeste was behind the Yeti check for that Magitech upgrade on Shadow. Another potential free check was Phoenix Cave that yielded 3 different fire-based weapons, Fire Knuckle, Fire Rod, and Flame Saber, how appropriate, and more importantly, an economizer and a gold hairpin for once someone in the party learned Ultima later in the seed, with a useless Madeline at the end of the check. Locke's other check, South Figaro Cave, had an Ultros Chupon fight for Stray that had Ice 3 on it. Had you instead gone to Edgar's checks, the Figaro engine room was Welk for an Aura Lance if you wanted to keep Edgar as your jump user, and Phoenix at the Ancient Castle, with the Red Dragon dropping yet another economizer if you missed the one in Phoenix Cave. Heading back to World of Ruin Narsh, a Dirt Dragon was waiting at the top of the mountain dropping a Thunder Shield, Chatternook gave you Siren at Tritok Cliff, and Tunnel Armor was aptly guarding Celeste with Dance at Umaro's check. Heading straight into the Magitech factory yielded an Illumina, which was nice having 3 characters now to use it, Calmless Protection with Fenrir, as well as Starlet at the end of the minecart ride, in addition to a fully operational Shadow. Morph Natural Magic Realm was at the South Figaro prisoner spot. Go-Go was the reward for defeating number 24 at Velt Cave, and hopefully you avoided Shadow's other checks at the Floating Continent, where not 1, not 2, but all 3 statue bosses were waiting for you, along with Odin, Fixed Ice, and Throw Strago after beating Rexol at the final spot. Realm's Esper Mountain had Slot Terror to keep you away from the Floating Continent with her 5 checks. World of Balance Narsh had 2 Espers for you if you did both Welk and the Narsh battle, but having to deal with tough bosses, the 3 Stooges and Guardian, although not as bad as the alternative. Espers at Sealed Gate Cave and Tizen Thief could finish off requirements, or some dug out Setzer from Zozo Tower to get more fast Esper-heavy checks. Since all of the really rude bosses were on the Floating Continent or in World of Balanced Narsh, aside from Doongaze and the Magitech Factory, Tritok was the only potential roadblock in Kefka's tower. There were a bunch of different builds for the seed depending upon when you went to go get Celeste or if you went to the floating continent, with the 2 swords lying around as well, Magitech upgrade, potential bum rush for Locke if you got enough levels, a jump or lance Edgar, and throw for Strago. Access to Siren, instant death in the form of Exfer, and Fenrir made for a relatively straightforward final Kefka, in which the best time was Christopher Warkins 1:28.53, beating out Javinator and Outlaw Star by almost 9 minutes. Here's the full leaderboard for the Chocobo class, with places 4 through 8 coming within 6.5 minutes of one another. Really tight action here in this class. The Blackjack class started off with Go-Go to pair with Natural Magic Rage Locke and Swordtech Edgar, so this meant a lot of waiting around for 2 Berserked characters to either use Rain Man's Bolt 3 or Letimeria's Magnitude 8, since the Rage list was pretty meager other than those options. The Figaro Throne had Raiden, and the Narsh Weapon Shop was an easy choice of an Atma weapon for later over a Genji shield with an 11 Battle Curse shield. Another set of rude 5% chests had Pugs, and another set of enemies that didn't give XP early on in South Figaro's town. With this group of starting characters, there were only 2 checks with bosses, and South Figaro Cave had Inferno, which one needed to get lucky with Rage and or levels to defeat for Lore Sketch Gao, who had Grand Train to start, while the Engine Room had Dullahan dropping a Megas Rod, who could easily be defeated by some purchasable Pearl Rods in World of Balance Tizen. Alternatively, you could have cracked the Flame Shield that Tizen Thief was holding on to if the Rage users couldn't carry you to victory. Along with Throw Mog, the vanilla Blue Dragon in the Ancient Castle wasn't a problem if the Rain Man Rage actually did what you wanted it to do, which gave us a Valiant Knife for Locke to use, and then checking the normal location for Katana Soul gave us an Offering to pair with it. Then, following Mog's checks, gave us a choice between an unknown non-character, which happened to be the Esper Golem, or a Ragnarok sword at Lone Wolf, so there was yet another build, this time for Edgar, if you let the unknown at the time quantity drop to the World of Ruin Moogle Cave, and Capture Terra was the reward for beating Doom at the Narsh battle. Walking back up to Welk had yet another character morph Celeste behind beating Funbaba, or staying put and triggering the Moogle defense showed you Realm, so it was getting pretty lopsided for most runners at this point in terms of character requirements. Yet another character, GP Rain Shadow, was at Celeste's free check, and Cyan was at the end of the Sealed Gate Cave before finally getting Carbuncle with Fire and Ice 3 from Gao Manor. Tracking down Espers was still rough, as Cyan's Dream had Strago, but thankfully also 2 Espers. Magitech Factory had not 1 but 2 offerings in his first 2 spots, after you most likely already had the one that you needed before giving up a shiny stone at the end of the minecart ride. Dome of Siege required you to beat Magimaster, and it only gave out an experience egg. Before long, runners eventually got to the goods at Mount Zozo Velt Cave, Gao's Velt Check Mobliz, and again, another seed with Setzer at Zozo Tower after having character requirements bailing us out with one of his checks. The seed wasn't done with us yet, as Doomgaze inhabited the Guardian spot in Kefka's tower, yet one last annoyance for our runners. With lots of characters and dead checks early on came a lot of different possibilities for party compositions. In this seed with Throw Mog, fully upgraded Swordtech Edgar, Valiant Knife offering Locke, Grand Train Gao, Big Swords for Terra or Celeste, and even Go-Go, who could use a combination of Throw, Swordtech, and Lore if you wanted to get wild. Golem, an upgraded Swordtech for instant death, and Phantom allowed us to deal with Final Kefka, as Boo took the top spot by just under 90 seconds over Golden Shocker with a final time of 1:38.33, getting 15 points in the standings. As there were 16 runners in this cart class, only half of them got points in this seed, but those that didn't get points will have more MP to dish out for the punishment week 2. Lastly is the Falcon class, who had arguably the easiest seed of the 3 carts this week, starting out with Jump Strago, joining the vanilla-ish characters Capture Locke and Tools Edgar. Calmless Protection on the Figaro Throne with Golem, a cheap 22,000 Starlet from Tizen Thief, a Minerva over a Genji helmet at the Narsh Weapon Shop, the lowest of the class's 10 Battle Curse Shield, along with an Illumina and Atma weapon in the boxes in World of Ruin South Figaro. What exactly are they shipping to this town again? This all gave our runners a great start. Lurking in the classroom monster in a box was Gigantos, which several runners took advantage of after doing a couple of early grinds in order to make sure that they wouldn't die to those throat jabs, and casting Golem for some defense, and perhaps getting lucky with instant death, Wing Edge procs gave a ton of levels. Those that went straight into Edgar's checks got a Dragon Horn at the engine room for our Jump Strago to use if we can get through number 24, with Locke's Fire 3 that he learned early from Natural Magic. Control Sabin down in the Ancient Castle could use the Illumina that we found now, or the Atma weapon later, or even the Ragnarok dropped by the Gold Dragon just a few feet away, which is usually not how his equipment pool pans out. Going to Collapsing House yielded Runic Terra, or South Figaro Cave had Morph Mog, so the World of Balance Narsh Loop could be taken full advantage of at that point. Welk had Throw Cyan, Lone Wolf gave us Tirado over Omegas Rod, Kefka at Narsh was Odin for defeating Atma, and Moogle Defense was Siren to deal with magic. Had you skipped Collapsing House and instead did Sabin's checks with Barren Falls, there was an Aura Lance, and since Equipment Pool was on our side today, our Horn plus Jump Strago could use this as a build if desired, since he could equip the Aura Lance. Those that went to the Sealed Gate Cave with Loot in mind were also treated to an Experience Egg in the first chest there, perfect for our eventual Atma weapon user, and yet another character in Umaro. After getting tons of characters up front, like in the Blackjack Seed, the checks we were left with were much nicer and granted way more espers. Breaking with tradition of the other two seeds, Zozo Tower was Bismarck this time around. Doma Siege had Raiden, Doma Dream had Ramu and Unicorn, but there was also where Setzer was hiding this time around. Imperial Camp, Sursa Skies, Mount Cult, Zebet's Rock, Umaro's Cave, all had espers, although Tritalk was just a Force Armor, which baited a few people up that way, but that was more than enough for Kefka unlock requirements. There was also a Shadow in Phantom Train, and a different set of checks you could have done if you avoided Collapsing House early, with him yielding 2 espers at Gal Manor and Velt Cave, so you didn't have to go to the Floating Continent. Kefka's Tower did have some pitfalls, with Tritalk on the left side and Doom on the right side, that some of our racers had to get past, but those that were prepared, and or with good party composition, got somewhat lucky. We're making very fast time for Final Kefka with Siren, Instant Death, and Golem on the throne for free at the start of the seed. Falconet continued his dominance with a 1:13.57 time, earning 20 points, along with Drinks Glue at 1:16.41 for 17 points, taking the top 2 spots in the overall standings. Although points are only usually reserved for the top 6 spots in the Falcon Cart class, 7 of our 12 actually got points this week, since there was a tie at the final spot between Honeydew and Nobody War, both getting a 1:28.42. A look at our overall leaderboard shows the Falcon Cart class runners taking up 7 of the top 13 spots, and the times overall will be pretty dependent on the type of seed that each cart class has to deal with for that particular week. Looking ahead in the schedule, we've got the Leet River Rally course for the upcoming week, so grab a paddle and let's check out the options. A bit of a different flavor here, as the Kefka unlock is 8 characters and 8 espers, and the skip is at 12 bosses plus the aforementioned Leet River check. However, you'll have to get lucky to find Terra, as you only start with Health Bannon, who is taking Strago's place, along with a full party of 4, meaning that your enemies start at level 10 without taking any free checks, so be careful on this one. Those free checks, however, will not yield any characters or espers. The exception will be things like Zone Eater, Phoenix Cave, or other longer checks without any fights in them. Those dead checks will give you the stronger item rewards instead of the standard, so more in line with Ultra Sleek settings there. You start with an increased number of lures, if you could find that command on one of your crew, and there is no access to Ultimate in this flag set, even if you uncurse the shield. While it's nice to have an extra character to start, this means that we'll have to take some more grind fights to get ahead of scaling, or take some more risks in starting with a potential Burning House check that has those random encounters lurking inside of the flames. I can't wait for this week's action to unfold, and we'll see, of course, now that there is NP available for our racers to use, if any will save up for a stronger spell in the future weeks, or if the shenanigans will start flying around this week. I've been The Schwantz27. Until next time.